To order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Welcome and good morning, and I also wanted to welcome a local class from Paul VI. Thank you for joining us today. They're here for their government day, so imagine some of them might live in my colleague's district also, but Northern Virginia School with a lot of folks I know there, so great to have you here today. Good morning and welcome to today's hearing, which is entitled National Science Foundation Part 1, Overview and Oversight. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. My district in Virginia is home to many research and technology companies on the forefront of technological innovation. So I'm very pleased that we're able to have this opportunity in this committee. The innovative products and services they offer are often the end result of taxpayer-supported research conducted at universities and research laboratories. The National Science Foundation is the primary source of federal funding for non-medical basic research. NSF funds 12,000 competitive grants a year and supports the work of over 375,000 scientists, engineers, educators, and students across the country. Basic and fundamental research is about good jobs and a secure future. Americans face enormous challenges, and NSF has a role to play in helping address them. Through research and activities supported by the NSF, we have the opportunity to boost our economy, enhance our national security, strengthen our cybersecurity infrastructure, and create a STEM job pipeline-ready workforce. The purpose of today's hearing is to provide an overview of the National Science Foundation's research and STEM education portfolio and priorities, and to update the committee on oversight matters. In January, the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act was signed into law, a bill that reauthorized many of the activities at NSF and reformed programs to maximize the nation's investment in research. I am proud that the bipartisan law resulted from the work that my subcommittee and this committee conducted last Congress, and I'm pleased that the bill that I sponsored, the Research and Development Efficiency Act, that I worked with my colleague here, Mr. Lipinski, on, was included, which will help reduce the regulatory burden on scientists and universities. This bill also included a number of provisions to improve the coordination of STEM education programs across the federal government and promote inclusion in the STEM fields. Last week, the President signed into law 2 additional STEM-related bills, which originated with this committee, that will help the next generation of young women have greater opportunities to pursue careers in the STEM fields that are central to our 21st century economy. We had the INSPIRE Act, which authorizes NASA to encourage young women to study the STEM fields and to pursue careers that will further advance America's space missions. And the other bill was the Promoting Women in Entrepreneurship Act, which was authored by my colleague, Ms. Esty, which promotes women in jobs in STEM fields through the NSF, and we pleased to have finally gotten those through the Senate, because we had passed them last Congress, but they didn't make it through the Senate, so glad we are able to move forward with those. Now, Dr. Córdova, I look forward working together on all of these efforts, and particularly in STEM and cybersecurity. And Ms. Lerner, I also greatly value the work of the Office of Inspector General. Your work and recommendations have led to millions of dollars saved, protecting the taxpayers' investment in research. I look forward to hearing more from both of you about your priorities for the coming year and about how we can work together to maintain our nation's leadership and innovation. I know we all have innovative STEM initiatives in our districts that provide models for others. I just wanted to mention a few that I have had and recently visited in my district. K2M, which is a medical device company, has an innovation challenge program that they're working on with their local schools. So they're getting young people in 9th grade to have a semester-long program working with them and mentoring them so that they pair up with somebody at the company to find out, in the engineering field of medical device technology. They particularly work on scoliosis and sort of hardware that helps medically deal with that problem. Also, I have Visa, who is partnered with Women in Technology and the STEM for Her program, which are putting on programs in my district, specifically in our region, designed for young women to get engaged, again, to get them engaged in STEM subjects. So I encourage other members of this committee to take these opportunities and all the opportunities that you all are providing through your good work to make sure we're getting all these programs out to our young people. And again, I'm pleased that we have a group of our young people here for this appropriate hearing for you. And with that, I look forward to hearing the testimonies of our guests, and I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and welcome to our distinguished panel. I'm glad we're having this hearing to get an update on the important work that's being done at the National Science Foundation. I want to thank Dr. Córdova for her leadership at the foundation. A few weeks ago, we had a number of NSF grant recipients here, and we had a chance to hear about and see some of the breakthrough research and innovations. This was only a small sample, but a great demonstration of the excellent work facilitated by funding from the NSF. The federal government is uniquely positioned to fund world-class research, especially high-risk, high-reward research that leads to transformative discoveries and innovations that drive our economy forward. In doing so, the National Science Foundation plays a vital role, not only in advancing the U.S. scientific enterprise, but also in shoring up our nation's ability to compete in an increasingly technology-driven and dynamic global economy. Funding for NSF has not been what I would like to have seen in recent years. I think many of my colleagues agree. This committee needs to push to make NSF funding a priority in this Congress as we face possible significant budget cuts. While we do this, we also need to make sure that NSF does the most possible with limited resources, and we'll get to some of that in today's hearing. I believe it's also important that Congress does not make the mistake of changing the funding priorities of the scientists at the NSF. The social sciences in particular make key contributions to critical national and global challenges. You've heard this from me many times before, but it's worth repeating. Social scientists are showing us the human factors involved in developing effective cybersecurity. This committee is working on strengthening cybersecurity in the federal government, and we need the input of social scientists to do this. Additionally, NSF funded social science research into cross-cultural, nonverbal communication, which was presented to this committee in 2011, helped the Army improve the way it trains its soldiers and lessen conflicts with foreign citizens. These are just a few examples of the value of social science research, which is only a small but very important portion of the NSF budget. Regardless of the field of research, the work at the NSF does not stop at the laboratory bench. Programs like the NSF Innovation Corps, or I-Corps, and the SBIR STTR program aim to help scientists bring NSF-funded research to market. I-Corps provides researchers with the education, mentoring, and networking necessary to begin the process of commercializing their research. And SBIR STTR provides funding to help small businesses transition NSF innovations to commercial products. I was proud to help lead the effort to authorize the I-Corps program in the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act, which passed last Congress. It was signed into law in January. I am also a strong supporter of the SBIR. As we review the important work going on at the NSF, I'd like to hear about NSF's plans for participation in the interagency working group on research regulation established in the AICA legislation, as the chairwoman mentioned. It doesn't make sense for our eminent scientists to be spending 42% of their time complying with federal research regulations. I've been a champion of this issue for years and was glad to see some of the language from the bill I introduced last Congress incorporated in the AICA. I look forward to hearing about the progress NSF has made in implementing a number of provisions of the AICA that address management challenges that have been the topic of hearings before this committee. I'm confident that NSF will take the necessary steps to implement the policy changes in the law. This hearing is a good opportunity to check in and see how things are going, although I know it's very early. Finally, I was pleased to learn that the NSF has made significant progress in increasing accountability in its management of large research facilities, lowering the cost of Intergovernmental Personnel Act appointments for rotating staff, and preventing research misconduct. I'm eager to learn more about how the agency is protecting our investment in research in these areas. Thank you again to Dr. Córdova and Ms. Lerner for being here. Look forward to your testimony, and I yield back.
And I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Smith, for his statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For nearly 70 years, the National Science Foundation has served as the basis of taxpayer-funded basic research. Since its creation in 1950, NSF's mission has been to promote fundamental scientific discovery in the national interest, which helps make the United States a world leader in knowledge and innovation. Our challenge this year is to set funding priorities that ensure America remains a leader in the global marketplace of ideas and products, while also recognizing budgetary limits. A full reauthorization of the science agencies under our jurisdiction, including NSF, will allow us to rebalance priorities and ensure that our nation's science agencies are on a trajectory to keep America at the forefront of scientific knowledge and discovery. The committee finished last year by completing work on the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act, which reauthorized some of NSF's activities. These include STEM education initiatives, entrepreneurship programs, and the BRAIN Initiative, and others. In fact, on January 6th, it was the last bill signed into law for the 114th Congress. The new law also reforms federal science agency programs to increase the impact of taxpayer-funded research. It improves accountability and transparency, reduces administrative burden on researchers, enhances agency oversight, and improves research coordination. I want to recognize Dr. Córdova for the steps NSF has taken to improve accountability over the last 2 years. In the past, I have been critical of NSF for funding of too many projects that seem marginal or frivolous. My concern is that low-risk, low-priority projects detract from investments into groundbreaking research that includes biology, physics, computer science, and engineering. The new law makes permanent and enhances NSF's transparency and accountability policy so that it describes in non-technical terms the research project it funds. The law also improves the NSF grant-making process. It affirms that research funded through the merit review selection process must be in the national interest by meeting one of 7 broader impact goals. These goals include increasing economic competitiveness, enhancing the health and welfare of the American public, developing a STEM workforce, and supporting the national defense. I hope these reforms will prevent future cost overruns and the use of taxpayer funds for the wrong ideas and subjects. I look forward to hearing from Dr. Córdova and Ms. Lerner about how the implementation of these reforms is proceeding and about the progress the NSF has made to be more accountable to taxpayers. I believe there has been noticeable improvement, but oversight challenges remain. The Inspector General's last report to Congress identified several areas in need of improvement or monitoring. These include NSF's management of rotator personnel, the Foundation's move to a new headquarters building in Alexandria, Virginia, NSF's management of the U.S. Antarctic Program, and its efforts to improve grant administration and encourage ethical conduct in research. I look forward to hearing more about these challenges and how we can work together to address them. Finally, I want to acknowledge that last week, President Trump signed into law 2 bipartisan Science Committee bills to promote the role of women in science, the Inspire Women Act, sponsored by Chairwoman Comstock, and the Promoting Women in Entrepreneurship, sponsored by Ms. Esty. These laws enable more talented young women to pursue their dreams and change the world with their ideas. NSF's support for groundbreaking basic research and STEM education can greatly help in making America prosperous. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and yield back.
Mr. Chairman, and I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee for a statement. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Chairwoman Comstock and Ranking Member Lipinski, for holding this hearing. And I welcome back to our distinguished witnesses, Dr. Córdova and Ms. Lerner. This hearing is an opportunity to introduce some of our new members to the mission and operations of the National Science Foundation and to review progress on some long-standing oversight issues. The National Science Foundation was established by Congress in 1950 to promote the progress of science. Those very words are written into the enabling and enacting legislation. For more than 6 decades, America's scientists and engineers have been submitting their best and most creative ideas to the Foundation for funding. For more than 6 decades, the Foundation has required that every one of those proposals undergo merit review by scientific peers in order to select and fund the best of the best. This is the case for all fields of science and engineering supported by the Foundation, from physics and biology to earth system science to the social, behavior, and economic sciences. The enacting legislation also established NSF to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. These words also are central to NSF's mission. The intent was not that every grant would be required to meet those particular criteria. The guiding rule of basic research is that you should not be constrained to a particular path or a particular application. To be constrained in what research is pursued is to fail to ask the most fundamental and compelling questions in science and engineering. To fail to ask the most fundamental and compelling questions is to miss out on the truly transformative scientific and technological breakthroughs. The intent since 1950 has been just that in the aggregate. The taxpayers' investments in NSF would help contribute to a more secure and prosperous nation, and the record shows that they certainly have. This is as true for the social and behavioral sciences as it is for the physics and engineering. This hearing is the first of two hearings this committee will hold before moving legislation to authorize appropriations for the National Science Foundation and to take a fresh look at the Foundation's 1950 Organic Act. While Congress has passed minor amendments to the 1950 Act, the central mission of the Foundation and the Foundation's reliance on competitive peer review to identify and fund the best proposals have remained untouched. In short, the 1950 Act has proven remarkably durable and worth preserving. Over the last few years, we have had vigorous debates in this committee about the National Foundation's mission and about the process for selecting and funding the best and most worthy grant proposals. In the bipartisan American Innovation and Competitiveness Act signed into law by President Obama in January, we arrived at a compromise that reaffirmed the National Science Foundation's gold standard merit review process while ensuring transparency and accountability in their grant decisions. This was a good outcome for U.S. science and for the taxpayer. As we consider additional NSF legislation this Congress, I hope that all of us sitting here behind the dais will truly listen to the experts sitting before us, and perhaps more importantly, to the experts across the science and engineering community who constitute the lifeblood of U.S. innovation and competitiveness. Once again, I want to welcome and thank the witnesses before us today, and I look forward to your testimony and to a fruitful discussion about NSF's progress on a number of oversight issues. And I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Now introduce our witnesses. Our first witness today is the Honorable France Córdova, Director of the National Science Foundation. Dr. Córdova was sworn in as Director of the NSF in March 2014. She is President Emerita of Purdue University, where she served as President from 2007 to 2012. From 1993 to 1996, she served as the Chief Scientist at NASA, and she's a recipient of NASA's highest honor, the Distinguished Service Medal. Dr. Córdova has a BA from Stanford University and a PhD in physics from the California Institute of Technology. Our second witness today is Ms. Allison Lerner, Inspector General for the National Science Foundation. Before joining NSF in April 2009, she served in many leadership positions at the Department of Commerce, including Counsel to the Inspector General. She has received several national awards for excellence, and in 2015 was appointed to serve as Vice Chair for the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. Ms. Lerner received her law and undergraduate degrees from the University of Texas. So I now recognize Dr. Córdova for 5 minutes to present her testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Comstock, Ranking Member Lipinski, Chairman Smith, and Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to speak to you today about the National Science Foundation. From our beginning, almost 70 years ago, NSF has operated in concert with the National Science Board under an extraordinary mandate to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, to secure the national defense. NSF has an annual budget that is currently $7.5 billion. We operate as a lean agency with low overhead. Fully 93% of our budget goes to support research and education. 85% of that goes to universities and colleges across the country, including community colleges. All of it decided by merit review. While our annual budget represents just 4% of the total federal budget for research and development, it accounts for 1/4 of the total federal support for basic research conducted at U.S. colleges and universities. In some fields, like computer science, we're the predominant support for academic research. NSF is the only federal agency that funds fundamental science, high-risk, long-term, curiosity-driven research over nearly all fields of science and engineering. The history of NSF is a history of profound discoveries. Last year, the first detection on Earth of gravitational waves, following our sustained investment for 40 years, and revealing the existence of large binary black holes. We have funded the research of 223 people who went on to win the Nobel Prize. Our mission to fund high-risk, fundamental research has yielded significant innovations with tremendous impact. For example, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, technologies integral to the internet and the iPhone, life-saving tools and therapies essential to our nation's hospitals, discoveries that have had a profound impact on our nation's economy, security, and health. NSF's mission requires being responsive to the national needs and changing landscape of science and engineering. And this means having the flexibility to continue investing in fundamental research that creates new knowledge in critical areas, such as cybersecurity. This also means sustained investment in developing a STEM-capable workforce, which can adeptly navigate the workplaces of the future. We don't know where the next groundbreaking discovery will come from, nor who will make it. NSF and the National Science Board have worked closely with Congress, the Office of the Inspector General, the science community, industry, and outside experts to be responsive to priority setting for our programs, to make internal improvements such as increased transparency and accountability, and to be focused increasingly on the management of our large major user facilities. The agency works closely with a wide array of partners to leverage its funding, as shown in this slide. NSF recently fashioned a long-term research agenda to push the boundaries of knowledge in the form of 10 big ideas. It's a powerful vision shown here that will ensure future generations continue to reap the benefits of fundamental science research. Investing in this strategic agenda, coupled with our sustained funding of current core programs, will ensure that our country leads in discovery, innovation, and impact. And speaking of impact, I'd like to close with a short video that shows but a few of the impacts of NSF's contributions to society.
NSF is helping enhance our nation's security by supporting basic research in approaches to counterterrorism, biometrics and cybersecurity, technologies to fight drug counterfeiting, tools to help assess and manage risks like drought and power outages. We're funding methods to detect explosives and IEDs and hacker intrusions, make infrastructure more resistant to natural hazards, and make more precise, localized weather warnings, predict when and where a crime will occur and a wildfire's rate of spread. NSF-funded science helps our nation's warfighters, having improved things like
GPS, our ability to really own the night, the new prosthetics. Frankly, the Department of Defense would not be what it is today without the support of the NSF.
And we're addressing food, water, and energy security, higher yield, disease-resistant crops, clean water, sustainable energy. NSF, creating knowledge to help strengthen America's security, safeguard our infrastructure, national interests, and our communities.
I think you can see that NSF's mission of investing in scientific discovery and discoverers bolsters our economy and security and keeps us a great nation. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We'll hear from Ms. Lerner. 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Comstock, Ranking Member Lipinski, Chairman Smith, and Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. As requested, my testimony will provide an oversight update, discuss continuing management challenges, and outline the Foundation's progress toward addressing OIG recommendations. I will focus on 3 of NSF's top management challenges: ensuring accountability over large cooperative agreements, the management of the Intergovernmental Personnel Act program, and the need to ensure the ethical conduct of research. With respect to the first challenge, NSF uses cooperative agreements to construct its largest and riskiest projects. Since 2010, my office has issued 28 reports containing more than 80 recommendations related to NSF's use and management of cooperative agreements. As a result of this work, NSF has developed new policies, procedures, and guidance which represent important steps towards accomplishing the goal of increased accountability over such projects. While NSF's actions led to the removal of a significant deficiency on NSF's monitoring of large cooperative agreements from the agency's 2016 financial statement audit, the Foundation's work in this area is ongoing. My testimony will highlight recommendations related to incurred cost submissions, earned value management systems, life cycle cost surveillance, and management fees, all of which remain open and are critical to NSF's ability to enhance accountability over its large facility projects. Incurred cost submissions provide information that is critical for adequate stewardship of federal funds. We have recommended that NSF require these submissions annually for projects valued at $50 million or more. NSF has developed a tool to collect expenditure data, which is currently being tested. When awardees start using this tool, we'll evaluate the data provided and NSF's actions in response to that information. We've also recommended that NSF require awardees to certify their earned value management systems, which provide critical information about a project's schedule and cost, and validate the data awardees submit to such systems. We are currently reviewing new guidance NSF has developed to address these recommendations. Because our work has identified risk across the life cycle of NSF's large facility projects, we recommended that NSF increase end-to-end cost surveillance for such projects, including obtaining current cost estimates and ensuring that awardees' accounting systems can properly handle federal funds. NSF has developed new policies and procedures to address these recommendations and has agreed to have a third party evaluate their implementation. With respect to management fees, our audits found that NSF did not obtain support from awardees to determine the need for such fee and did not review the charges awardees paid using management fee. We've recommended that NSF require awardees seeking such fee to detail all the sources of revenue. NSF is revising its management fee policy, but is not committed to implementing this recommendation. Moving forward, we will examine how NSF is applying its new policies and procedures for both construction and operations awards, and pay close attention to NSF's actions in response to new oversight requirements in the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act. A key contributor to the progress that has been made in this challenge has been the Stewardship Collaborative, which was established by OIG and NSF in 2010 as a collective effort to help accomplish the shared mission of proper stewardship of the taxpayers' investment in science. The second challenge I will address relates to NSF's use of temporary personnel under the Intergovernmental Personnel Act. NSF regularly brings IPAs to NSF for rotational assignments of up to 4 years. Since IPAs serve in a temporary capacity, there is significant turnover in staff at NSF, especially in executive positions. The Foundation's use of IPAs also comes at a high cost. In 2015, NSF paid nearly $8.9 million for 27 executive-level IPAs. Finally, because IPAs remain employees of their home institutions while at NSF, most come to the Foundation with known conflicts of interest, which must be identified, managed, and mitigated. We've made recommendations to reduce costs associated with IPAs and to strengthen controls over their conflicts. NSF has begun to take steps to reduce IPA costs and, among other things, no longer reimburses IPAs for lost consulting income. Moving forward, we plan to examine NSF's actions in response to our IPA-related recommendations, as well as its actions in response to the Competitiveness Act, which required the Foundation to report on its efforts to reduce IPA costs. The third challenge relates to the need to ensure the ethical conduct of research. Research misconduct, defined as plagiarism, fabrication, or falsification in proposed or funded research, damages the scientific enterprise, is a potential use of public funds, and undermines the trust of citizens in government-funded research. It's therefore crucial to the integrity of research funded with taxpayer dollars that NSF-funded scientists adhere to the highest ethical standards. NSF takes research misconduct seriously and has been responsive to our recommendations. My office will continue to utilize the full range of our audit and investigative resources to exercise robust oversight of NSF's stewardship of federal funds and to safeguard the integrity of the Foundation's operation. Public trust and confidence demand the highest level of accountability, and we look forward to working with NSF management, the National Science Board, and Congress to achieve this goal. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. And I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Dr. Córdova, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm very interested in the investments that NSF is making in cybersecurity research and education, and obviously we are seeing that is a growing area where we need to make sure that our country is on the cutting edge so that we can protect all of our assets, whether they're financial, military, and otherwise. So this is, and actually I see there's some more students here, right? I don't, are you from, do we have some students here, another group? Because we had one earlier. I just wanted to recognize you and thank you. What school are you all from? Lake Braddock? Oh, great. So they might be yours, Mr. Byers, some of yours, or Mr. Connolly's? Okay. Great. Well, very nice to have you here. Cybersecurity is an area you can all study, right? Lots of good jobs there. Sorry, I'm off track here. But anything you might be able to tell us on how we can best work, NSF can best work with industry to make sure that cyber education programs match the workforce needs and to make sure that we are really responding to this, great need and sort of the crisis we have in having a cyber workforce.
Thank you for your question, Chairwoman Comstock. And let me take this opportunity to say welcome to the students. And I hope that eventually you will apply for an NSF grant. As cybersecurity and all things cyber is really the theme of our age. We, when I was the student's age, we didn't have nearly so much cyber to utilize and do good things for us, nor to also pose the kinds of threats that it does today. And so we were very pleased to see Congress's interest in some of the programs that we have, like Computer Science for All, and our cyber core programs. Those would be two of them. And I just want to say a couple of words about each. Computer Science for All has the goal of preparing students for 21st century jobs. And NSF has a plan with other agencies to, we do this in our education division and also in our computer division to encourage teacher training in computer science in K through 12 and to encourage all students to take computer science because we think that this combined, of course, with English and reading and mathematics studies will make them prepared to do anything. So NSF is, as a consequence of these programs, is investing in activities to advance effective teaching and learning of computer science. We are supporting the design of instructive materials and scalable and sustainable professional development models and resources. We also have a program called CyberCore, which we do with a couple of other agencies. We do it with the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of Personnel Management, and we work closely to monitor trends in the availability of positions in government and evolving needs in the preparation of cybersecurity experts. And every year we hold a jobs fair in January, and this was well attended by some a congressman and a senator as well. And there we hear from agencies across the government about their needs, and we try to match students who are prepared to take these jobs with those availabilities. So those are just some of the indications. Of course, you mentioned industry, Chairwoman Comstock, and we have a lot of programs with industry that are very excited about pioneering new methods of including cybersecurity grants to go along with their needs for their industries.
Great. Now, another area in terms of veterans and getting them transitioning to STEM careers, I know we just wanted to see what we might be able, with NSF, how they're tracking veterans and hiring of veterans, and if you are able to give us can you add a box to the form so we know how many veterans are actually getting grants or how much they're involved in the STEM careers that where you're working with veterans? Do you have an estimate on the veterans' involvement?
I can prepare a better answer for you that would follow this hearing because I don't know all the details. I am aware of a program because I've participated in it where we fund veterans as graduate students, and we bring them to the agency to talk about what they do and what their grants, how they're transforming their lives. And this is a very very special program to see the effect that it's had on graduate students, and to hear that one time when they were in the desert and looking up at the stars, they decided that when I'm finished with my assignment, I'm going to be an astronomer, that sort of thing. But they are doing all sorts of STEM-related graduate studies. I know that we have other programs for veterans, and I'll be happy to supply that information later.
Great, thank you. And I now recognize Mr. Lipinski for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Córdova, I just want to, I'm going to ask a very sort of high-level question, but I think it's important to understand, for everyone to understand how the NSF develops, or how the research budget across the different directorates in the NSF and offices in NSF is developed. So we all have a good understanding of how the priorities are established within and across the directorates. Could you give the thumbnail sketch of that?
Yes, there are many inputs in setting research priorities for each of the directorates and for the agency as a whole. Those inputs can come from Congress itself, from the White House, clearly from the science and engineering communities. The National Academy plays a big role. In some cases, they have studies which they call decadal or 10-year studies that take a year or more to do, and they set out the priorities for particular fields. And we are very responsive to all the input that we get. After that, it is we have to make decisions with the leadership and the staff about what directions look like they're current and that we're getting a lot of input on to pursue, and weigh what the budget is that we have in order to do that, and look for a balance across the agency to support all fields of STEM engineering. Because as I said in my opening remarks, that we don't know where the next discovery will come from nor who will make it. And so we want to be sure that we support all of science and engineering.
And in regard to my understanding is there's much more that is being done now across directorates, across fields. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of cross-directorate projects. A good example would be our food, water, energy system studies, because food, water, and energy are vital to our economy and the whole globe. Another cross-directorate initiative would be our risk and resilience, because we have a lot of risks from earthquakes and floods and hurricanes, all kinds of phenomenon, and we want to be sure that citizens are prepared enough to perhaps mitigate or prevent some of these from happening with such devastating consequences. And then I showed a slide of NSF's 10 big ideas, and all of those, I would say, represent cross-directorate pursuits of the really big research areas where we can make an impact on our future.
And finally, the impact that we see from research in the social and behavioral sciences. I know that's something, as you know, that I have often talked about here because the importance, even though it's a very small part of the NSF budget. Are there any grand challenges in social and behavioral sciences that you can talk about here?
Well, I think we saw in the video a whole lot of them to do with national security. In any endeavor where there are people involved, either as individuals or as groups, the social sciences becomes very important. So cybersecurity has already been mentioned a number of times this morning, and I know you've had hearings on cybersecurity, and you've learned that, we've all learned, that much of our cybersecurity depends on individuals and their responses to make us secure. So there are just, I can't think of a sphere of human endeavor that doesn't really need social sciences to inform it. One of our big ideas is called the human technology frontier. We know that as we're speaking, that life is changing. The way that we work and that we play, that we educate ourselves, it is changing because of technology. How do we confront that technology? How do we shape it in order to do good for us and to really make it useful and helpful depends a lot on social sciences and behavioral studies. So I think it's actually, it's becoming fast, perhaps one of the most important things that we invest in because it touches all aspects of our lives.
Thank you. Yield back.
Recognize Mr. Abraham, the Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank the witness for being here. I'm a physician by trade, and when I read a journal or a scientific article, unfortunately, the first thing I go to is the author and to research whether he or she has in the past given a reliable data, and it goes back to our research integrity, Ms. Lerner, and you referenced, I read your testimony, that over the last 4 years, there's been 175 cases of misconduct in NSF researchers, and that is a major concern because we base policy on this research. My question is, what recommendations have you made to the Secretary as to trying to clean up this research integrity or lack of thereof?
Thank you, sir. Each time our office conducts an investigation into research misconduct and determines that there actually was research misconduct, we make recommendations to the foundations to try to protect its interest. Depending on the magnitude of the problem, the recommendations can range from requiring the individuals, when they submit future applications, to certify and assure NSF that they are not continuing to, that they are not plagiarizing or falsifying or fabricating data. They can include requiring taking training in
So I assume in the
conduct of
last 4
research.
years, you've made 175
Yes.
recommendations. Now,
And
how many of
sometimes-
those have been actually done?
The agency has a very strong track record of affirming our
Good.
recommendations, including debarring some of the worst offenders from receiving federal funding.
Okay. Doctor, you want to come in, or?
We take this incredibly seriously. In fact, Ms. Lerner and I meet every month, at least once a month, and the very first thing we do is look at these research misconduct examples and say how well we're doing in responding to the recommendations and all. But let me also just give a point of view from being a past president of 2 universities, that at the university this is also taken
I understand.
incredibly seriously. And so we work in concert with the universities, as Ms. Lerner knows well, in order to make the punishment fit the crime, if you know what I mean. So that's, we have to be careful there.
And I appreciate that, perspective, because it's not only in the NSF, it's unfortunately across all scientific borders, but again, because we are responsible for funding, it becomes a point of accountability. So that'll transition us somewhat to the STEM discussion that is so important. We have students here, and we know the federal government for decades has been involved in STEM research, but unfortunately, we on the STEM side for our students seem to be falling further and further behind. We know private industry needs them. We know government needs a STEM student to step up and take the baton and do great things, as you mentioned in your video. So my question to you, Doc, is, how can we assure the public that hopefully is listening to some of this, that their investment in the NSF for STEM research is actually going to work?
We are almost unique among agencies in really tying the research very closely with our educational mission. And so that mission is really to encourage STEM education and development of a STEM workforce. We spend over $1 billion a year on the educational mission, and we have programs in, of course, in graduate school, undergraduate, K through 12, teacher training programs, curriculum development programs in order to encourage it. What we really need to do, and that was emphasized in the 2 bills that were really passed in Women in Science and Women in Entrepreneurship, is that we need to encourage women and underrepresented minorities in general to be role models and to encourage everyone to go into STEM careers. Just this morning, I read in our NSF News notes about a young woman at Stanford University, which is where I was an undergraduate, who went into a classroom to take a computer science course, to sit in there and see if she would stay. And there were only 2 other women in the class, so she didn't stay in that classroom. And I had exactly the same experience when I was a student, went to a physics class. I was the only woman in the class. So it took me a long time to get back into physics. It makes, these things really make a difference when you can see people who are like yourselves, whether they're in the classroom, whether they're standing in front of you being a teacher, or whether they're in informal learning programs that we have at museums and elsewhere on television shows.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
For 5 minutes?
Thank you very much. Dr. Córdova, over the years, there have been a number of questions about the peer review process. And the National Science Foundation has been very responsive in holding meetings and bringing groups in to listen to what processes that's used. And because of that, I've had hardly any questions recently about this gold standard. But I would like you to review that a little bit for the committee, the process by which you use to determine the grants that you fund.
Thank you. And I think you all have a booklet in front of you that looks like, well, we don't have one back here, but you have a booklet. Thank you. Mr. Abraham, if you turn to page 6 of your booklet, so that in case you forget everything I say here, it's there. So merit review is just so critical to everything the NSF does, because all of our grants are given through a merit review process. And so what does that look like? In short, it means that every proposal is reviewed by a minimum of 3 external people, and usually it's 10 or a dozen people, and they're reviewed first separately, and then those reviewers most often come together in a panel meeting at NSF headquarters and talked with each other about the merits of the proposals. The merit reviewers go through a training course. Now we have a new pilot program that has all kinds of things in it to up their game, to give better feedback to proposers, for example, they may not be funded, how to improve their proposals. And we take this process incredibly seriously. In fact, it was a surprise to me when I came to NSF that on any given day, between 200 and 600 visitors, external scientists and engineers, are coming in through the door, and you just have to come at the wrong time and know that you have to wait a long time for the elevator, like as I did this morning, to go to these panel rooms and to talk about the individual proposals. They give them very serious consideration. They then make a recommendation to the program officer, who takes these recommendations of all the proposals and all the different groups who are meeting, and has to come up with a balanced program. That means one that's non-duplicative, that is really looking, as we've mentioned, at the national interest, according to the goals of that program officer's program and the larger goals of the whole division. Does the recommendation make sense in that context? And then it is the program officer's responsibility to forward a recommendation or not to the division director, who then signs off on the proposal. This is a gold standard, I have to underline. It has been so well reviewed. We have committees of visitors, 50 of them on all different subject matters in any given 4-year period, who come in and review the merit review process itself and make suggestions for recommendations. So it is widely copied by other countries.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a hiring freeze on. How has this affected you so far, or has it at all?
Well, yes, it has affected us, especially because we're relocating soon. This summer, we're going to Alexandria, where the headquarters will be moved, and so that's meant with or without a hiring freeze, there is just a natural attrition that goes on when you move, and clearly we'll get so that Mr. Byers not worried. We'll have others that come in and want to join NSF, and we'll find Alexandria the very best place to live and work. But it does put a stress at this particular time, because we have a hiring freeze, and so if we lose people, we can't backfill them unless they have emergency kinds of positions. So we do have concern about that. But we have a good agency. If you looked at the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, you see that we made number 10 among all medium-sized agencies this year in the satisfaction of the workforce. And we, by and large, we're good at holding on to people. So it's a balance. Are we worried? Yes. Are we overly concerned? No. We're hopeful that we'll get past the hiring freeze and that we will be able to fill these positions, which are critical for science and engineering.
Thank you very much. My time's expired.
Oh, thank you. And actually, since we're on that topic, if I could take ask a little bit more on that area. What kind of outreach, because I do have constituents, obviously, who are there too, and what kind of outreach is being done with folks as you have that transition and as people are maybe making that if they're coming from my part of the area, that's a little further commute. So what are you seeing in terms of expectations?
That's right. Well, I really have to commend the group, our Office of Information and Resource Management, led by Joanne Torno, and Brian McDonald and her group in particular, who leads the relocation effort. The whole team has just gone really put a lot of effort into having messages, weekly messages through our NSF Weekly Wire to staff, to hosting workshops and open houses in-house. They even recently, on Monday, they brought in a lot of the enterprises from Alexandria, like the condos and restaurants and et cetera, with all sorts of information so that the staff could see that. We have with us the head of our union here at this hearing, and he has worked very hard with the union to ensure that the negotiations go very smoothly over various important things, and we are just in the last phases of that now. And so I think the whole thing has gone with a lot of effort and constant attention to the staff and their needs and getting to pick out their offices, their space, and how that looks and so on. I think it's gone very, very well, and I'm just very, very proud of NSF. It's a very big deal to move 2,200 people or so, even if it is just 9 miles away, and there's a lot of planning that's gone into it. It'll take 6 weeks, in fact, for us to fully do that move.
Okay, thank you for letting me address that, a little bit of a parochial issue. But now I'll also recognize Mr. Webster for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was interested in what Mr. Abraham said about us spending lots of money for several decades trying to attract people into STEM. I guess this would be for Dr. Córdova. And yet we're always told we're way behind. We keep falling further and further behind. Is there any studies being done to understand what works and what doesn't work? I mean, we were told here a couple of weeks ago that every time there was a space shot, there would be lots of people headed towards a career just because of that. And one person told me, who's a member of the Congress, he was attracted by Star Wars movies. So I just wondered if there's any kind of proven way that we can draw new people into STEM fields.
This, the best way to, yes, we've made big investments in trying to understand this better, and the best way to draw them in is to first provide access and to make sure that they can see, talk with scientists, engineers, have good curriculum, good teachers in their classrooms. We're so concerned, Mr. Webster, with this question that when I came into the agency, we started a new program called Includes, NSF Includes. That's an acronym, but it's an acronym that means what it says. And we are now funding 40 pilot programs across the nation to try to move the needle in STEM and have communities. So this goes beyond universities. It extends to community colleges, citizens groups, mayors, the whole town, getting together to address the particular needs of their communities and how they can bring all those who have not been exposed to STEM more in touch with it. So we do rely on museums and others as part of this partnership. Every one of these 40 pilot projects is completely different. They're all over the country. We're studying it and we're going to be evaluating it very closely, because what we're hoping is that we find programs that scale, that can be replicated, that are really making a difference. Every program has a goal and metrics, and they're evaluated against that. And we want to ensure at the end of the day that we actually have, that these includes programs have done what they said they're going to do. They broaden the participation of people who have not yet know about STEM careers and bring them into that fold, and have something to offer, and just the way you're talking about lessons learned so that others can replicate those kinds of programs.
So, do we profile? I mean, do you profile what a potential STEM student might look like, or be like, or act like?
Well, I don't.
I just
I
thought
think
about, wait a minute, I got
that's
an
impossible.
idea. I just thought of one. When I was at Georgia Tech as a freshman, all of us had to take composition, and they spotted us a C because we only think out of the left side of our brain. So maybe there's a start, I don't know. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think we definitely don't. I was an English major when I was in college because people like my parents and friends and teachers all thought that I would go to college to get married, and that's a form of profiling, right? And so little did they know it would be harder to do that than to become a rocket scientist. But I then discovered through television, public television, a show on stars, just like you're saying, that you bring people to Florida to watch the space program. I saw the astronauts land on the moon. That was transformative. I saw scientists from MIT talk about dropping marshmallows onto a neutron star, hypothetical marshmallows onto a neutron star, and how much energy that would liberate. And I said, wow, that really speaks to me. I've got to do that. So I was the most unlikely person to become a scientist, according to anybody around me growing up. But it happened. And it happens because people have those moments of inspiration that really touch them and speak to them. And then they say there's nothing stopping them, and they find the pathway.
Thank you, and thank you for your passion on that. I know I met a young student who had scored perfectly on all of his science, and he's about 15, 16. He had taken all these advanced tests already. So being a grandmother, I did ask him, so was there anything particular you did or that your mom did? And she said they watched Little Einstein is what captured his imagination in science and STEM. So my granddaughter now is a big fan at 2 years old of the Little Einstein show. So but I think that goes to also capturing children's imagination at a very young age and having programs in school on STEM education that they don't lose them in that elementary age, transitioning into junior high too. So sorry, I'm editorializing along here, but now let me recognize Ms. Bonamici for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Lipinski, and thank you to our witnesses. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I'm just going to follow up on this briefly, and I'm glad the students are here as well. I also serve on the Education Committee, Education Workforce Committee, and I am the founder and the co-chair of the bipartisan STEAM caucus. And STEAM integrates arts and design into STEM learning. It does not detract from it, it enhances it. And we've seen the benefits of STEAM in schools that are using that approach. It's hands-on learning, things like maker spaces, integrating arts and design into STEM learning. It has a lot of benefits. You mentioned left brain. It engages more students. It also educates both halves of the brain and results in more creative students who are better communicators. And I think your English degree probably has something to do with the fact that you are a great communicator today. There is research that shows that the Nobel laureates in sciences are much more likely to be engaged in arts and crafts in their spare activity than other scientists. And the brain research is there to support this as well. We have model STEAM schools across the country, and I encourage all of my colleagues on this committee to join the bipartisan STEAM caucus and learn more about the benefits of STEAM. Dr. Córdova, you outlined the critical ways that the NSF supports research at universities. Oregon State University in my home state is one example. They've really leveraged NSF funding, particularly Geosciences Directorate funding, to study the ocean's primary production and food web, as well as to study the coastal impacts of the 2015-16 El Nino and the consequences for coastal flooding and ongoing beach erosion. So these studies and discoveries are critical not only for coastal communities, but also for our global ocean health and food supply. And I know NSF is a critical funder of basic research in ocean sciences, along with NOAA, but NSF is critical. That research is supported from within the Geosciences Directorate, which we know has often been the target of attempted cuts. So can you please discuss the importance of those investments to our economic and national security? And I think I'll have time for another question as well.
So first of all, can I just make a STEAM comment because of
Absolutely.
the students
We
here?
welcome
So those phones, those iPhones or whatever kind of smartphones that you have, students are the result of a STEAM-like approach.
Absolutely.
That they have incredible technologies, all of them, interestingly, first funded by the federal government to people at universities, like the lithium iodide battery and the touch screens and the microprocessors and all. So, and GPS, of course, but somebody like Steve Jobs and company put all that together with an eye towards very creative design. And then we have something that's amazingly useful and creative to use.
That's a great example.
Yeah. So on ocean science, yes, of course. I mean, the planet, 70-some% of the planet is covered by oceans, and it's vital to life. It may have been the source of life on this planet, the beginnings of it itself. It's important for transportation, and it's important for the health of our food supply. We eat fish. We have lots of plants that grow in the ocean, and the science that can be yielded by understanding with our ships, our vessels, our explorers in the oceans, understanding the life in the ocean and the health of the ocean is just so important to our own health and to jobs and to national security and as well as our own security of our coastal communities and so forth. So it's just very, very important that we have good monitoring of our oceans. And
Absolutely. I want to get another question, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but NSF is proposed to build a new regional class research vessel as a cutting-edge platform for scientists to address ocean science questions that are a priority of the National Academy's Decadal Report for Ocean Sciences. And it's my understanding that the project is on hold because we're operating under a partial fiscal year 2017 continuing resolution. So if Congress approves these vessels, how will they contribute to the advancement of ocean sciences?
Yes, so everything is still going along with, as you know, with Oregon State University's leadership, and they will make a recommendation in a month or two about shipyard selection and so forth. Our fleet is aging. And it just simply must be replaced. These vessels have the newest kinds of technologies, and we can have fewer ships, and the end goal by 2022 is to have something like 15 vessels instead of 18 in the academic research fleet, and that's much more than just NSF. But these RCRVs, research class research vessels, are integral to that because they do have more technology, they can do more science on them, be more efficient. They can replace the old ships, and we can retire more ships and utilize those with all the latest science.
Terrific. Well, we support efficiency. So thank you very much, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I now recognize Chairman Smith for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And Dr. Córdova, let me address a couple of questions to you. The first one is, want to thank you for doing your best to implement the national interest standard that we've discussed over the last couple of years. But my question is, how are you going to enforce that national interest goal on a grant-by-grant case? What are you doing individually?
So we have we have the criteria, as you know, intellectual merit and the broader impact criteria. And this feeds into broader impacts, of course. And we are asking all of our proposers to, in their abstracts, which we now require a non-technical abstract as well as the technical abstracts that are sometimes a little harder for the public to understand. The non-technical abstract should say what is the importance of this project and which of those many things that you mentioned earlier does it address.
And each individual grant applicant gets that guideline, right?
Gets that guideline, yes.
And then their grant is evaluated by another individual, and that individual is looking to make sure that standard is met, right?
The person who has the general answer is yes. The person who has the particular responsibility is the program officer. Those program officers are our staff, and they have the training.
Do you have any metrics yet as to how many grants have succeeded in meeting that standard and how many have not?
No.
Just in general, I'm just wondering if...
Yeah. Well, we've been looking with these corrective lenses that you've given us, let me call it that, for since January of the past year, not this year, but last year. And so we will, we are doing what we said we were going to do. And we in order to be recommended to, remember that only 1/5 of the proposals we get 50,000 proposals a year. We can only fund 1 out of every 5 of them at most. That those that go up for recommendation to the division leader, that's the kind of thing that would be looked at. And we have sent, I have a person, as I had promised, in my office, his name is Jim Hamos, who works closely with the process and what are the guidelines that they're being followed and monitors that in a general sense. But we certainly believe, because they go up to the division leaders who are also trained and are educated about how important this is, that they wouldn't go up without that kind of a recommend. That would be part of it. And a proposal can go back to the proposer for corrections, and we do that all the time, just so you know, Chairman Smith, that the title is not clear, doesn't make sense. The abstract doesn't make sense. You haven't addressed this, you haven't addressed that. And ultimately, we've given the program officer the wherewithal to, if it still is not coming back in a good form that is good for the public to review, that the program officer, that's his or her responsibility.
Alrighty, thank you for that. In regard to the occasional, though I understand they may be increasing, research misconduct and fraud, to try to correct that prospectively?
Well, there are official standards about research misconduct and plagiarism and falsification of data, and we are working. You know that most of our grantees are universities and colleges, 85% of them. So we would work closely with them. We make sure that they know what the law is and what the guidelines are, and then they're judged against.
If I can interrupt you just real quick,
Yeah.
because I don't know the answer to this question. Are there any sanctions to be imposed on individuals who might engage in fraud?
Oh, absolutely.
What are the sanctions other than denial of a grant or something?
Well, the sanctions are, there's a full spectrum of sanctions, and Ms. Lerner can give you more detail on that, but they go all the way from not letting the person submit grants for a few years to debarment. And sometimes, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that the punishment has to fit the crime. So if you forget quote marks, but you do have the reference there, that is different than intentionally copying something and not giving credit.
Madam Chairwoman, could I have an additional 30 seconds only, real quickly, for our last question, and this is in regard to dyslexia funding. Not everybody on the committee may know it, but NSF is spending $2.5 million a year. And I just wonder what you envision the next steps to be in research that will benefit those with dyslexia.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. It's part of the READ Act, and as you know, that's mostly in our 2017 budget, which is on continuing resolution. But ahead of that we have been funding the good proposals that we get on dyslexia. I think the next thing, and I just made a trip to Florida State University to see the Magnet Lab there this week, and had a really good talk with their dyslexia folks there. And so the challenge is for NSF to find out what its particular role in dyslexia research should be. And that should be very upstream. It should be the basic, the fundamental research, because we have the National Institute of Child Health Care that funds a lot of research on learning disabilities, and there's also an institute in the Department of Education. So NSF wants to do something where nobody else is touching it in this space. So, to answer your question, Chairman Smith, I think that we need to bring in the fall a workshop at which I hope that you will give a keynote and bring together the scholars and workers in this field and talk about what should be NSF's special contribution in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Córdova.
Excellent. Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Byer for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, very much. I often find myself offering respectful disagreement with my chairman, so I'd like to heap praise on him for his leadership on the dyslexia issue. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lerner, you expressed concern about the increasing number of IPAs in executive level positions and the fact that that they're significantly more expensive because they're paid at the rate of their university, and that it's gone from 20 in 2009 up to 29 in 2016. And it's like 7 out of 9 of the senior level positions. And what's the right balance? How do we figure out how many should be long-term permanent government employees at the GS type rates, and how many should be IPAs pulled from the university?
Thank you. Striking the balance is more the agency's call than mine. I would point out in making the determination as to how to strike that balance, you certainly need to consider the strengths and the bench expertise that the scientists who have ongoing research practices bring to the foundation and to the merit review process. But you have to balance that against the costs and the fact that those costs are paid for out of research funding. So I would defer to the agency in determining whether what the right number is, but I think you certainly have to consider both the good and the challenge that comes with the IPAs when you do that.
Thank you. Shifting to the chairman's question about fraud, plagiarism, things like that, I note that 175 cases over 4 years with 12,000 grants a year is a little more than 3 cases per 1,000 grants, which I would argue is actually better than our ethical record in the U.S. House. But it's up from where we used to be. So, Dr. Córdova, why do you think that's increasing?
That's because of the talented Ms. Lerner and her group, one could say. Our analytical tools, why do we find more cancer? Got better analytical tools. And so that certainly could have a bearing on it.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that there is more of it, it's just we're discovering more. Yeah. And Ms. Lerner, in her long testimony, talked about the big 4 things she was concerned about. And, one by one, number 1 was incurred cost submissions, so waiting OMB approval, earned value management systems. You guys are begun validating inputs, end-to-end cost surveillance, third-party evaluation by September 30th. Everything looks very responsive on the part of leadership's part. The one question you said that was, the National Science Foundation indicated it will be revising its management fee policies, but has not committed to requiring awardees to report on other sources of revenue. And Dr. Córdova, why is that a hurdle? The notion of asking your grantees to report on other sources of revenue with respect to management fees.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, so I'll get you a more complete answer after this. But we did we did make changes in the management fee policy. I'll start with that. As a result of the NAPA recommendations and the recommendations of the OIG. And we, I will say that our group in budget and finance respectfully tortured themselves over the question of management fee and how to do it right, and looked at a lot of other government agencies and how they do it, and adopted the government-wide model of how to handle management fees, with the one added change that we do have a list of things that our management entities should not do with the fees. When it comes to monitoring, asking the kinds of questions that you just said, and close monitoring of it, we don't really have the workforce to do this, because once you say you're going to do something and monitor it, then you actually have to be responsive to that, responsible, and continually do it, and that would take a kind of workforce, the type that, and a number that we simply don't have. And so what we're doing instead are spot checks on where we think that the risk is higher because of the cost of the project or because its sensitivity, any number of reasons, and doing spot checks on utilization of the management fee.
Okay, great. So, because I think the most painful hearing we've had yet has been the management fees for the alcohol and the Christmas parties. Yeah.
Well, that's on the no-no list.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
And now recognize Ms. Esty for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Comstock and Ranking Member Lipinski. Thank you again to Ms. Lerner and to my good friend, Dr. Córdova. I think you can guess where I'm going to be going, Dr. Córdova, given our shared passion around inclusion and STEM. I have a STEM advisory committee, and we've been working hard to find ways to encourage underrepresented populations, particularly girls and children of color, to get them excited. I know you've talked about the initiatives in NSF, and I do want to note the President has signed 2 bipartisan bills, and both of them were on women in STEM coming out of this committee, which I think is a testament. The Chairwoman and I sponsored those, and I think that's a testament to the importance of these provisions.
And
now,
I owe you a pen. I've got it.
Oh, I'll take the pen. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, and this came up in my STEM advisory committee recently with a woman, Kelly Johnson, who administers STEM grants, and who was talking about sort of the disturbing research that's out there about how early girls self-identify as not being, quote, smart enough for math and science. And how also, I think you've presented some of this information of how when MIT changed its course description for one of its computer science classes to have the subject matter be around social issues and health issues, they found that the participation of women in that course skyrocketed to over 50%. Can you talk a little bit about whether you think NSF has a role and how we could help design curricula in elementary and middle school that would incorporate that growing body of knowledge about what tends to get girls more involved in science, and maybe broaden not just experiential work, as my colleague Ms. Bonamici has talked about, but also even subject matters of how are you taking these power tools of math and science and applying them to maybe somewhat different issues, maybe broader issues, clean water in Africa, health issues in our inner cities. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
We do fund development of course curricula in K through 12, and we would welcome proposals that went along those lines. And we, as a result of your Women in Entrepreneurship, because it's all related, it goes back to when you're little, that I think I would be tempted to recommend to my colleagues at NSF that we issue a Dear Colleague letter to encourage the submission of that kind of curriculum I think it could truly make a difference to be exposed and at those young ages to that kind of curriculum. I'm also hoping, I talked earlier about our Includes program, and that would, and we funded 40 pilots in the first round, and we have another round coming up here. That kind of thing would make a wonderful Includes project too, and I'm sure there are people listening who would be inspired to do that.
Could you talk a little bit about the scaling up? I know that's a key part of what you're looking at. And how does NSF propose, or what do you think is going to be necessary once you identify programs that can be scaled up? How are we going to disseminate that information? Because that's a question I've been asked a lot. I think there are a lot of innovative programs around the country, and I find even in my own state of Connecticut, in my own district, people in the same field don't even know about projects occurring 2 towns away. Do you think, what role do you think NSF or we can play in helping to disseminate information once we identify programs that are really working?
Yes, well, it's on all of us to do that, of course. But we've determined that in the Includes program that we will not only carefully evaluate how these projects are going, but we will also take the best practices, and we are bringing together periodically the leaders of these programs to give talks, as they did in January, to each other about how things are going. But we do need to remember that documenting the results of a study and putting it in an open literature, an open website, is just incredibly important. And I know you've mentioned it at our previous hearing too. I think that this gives us a new start, having this Includes program. It's a great place to see how successful we can be with documenting these programs, putting the lessons learned on a website so that everybody can learn from the experiments of others and can extract what's most valuable from those programs. So I think you are really on the leadership edge of this, Congresswoman Esty, and we can do something so that by the next hearing I'll have a better answer.
Thank you very much. Now I yield back.
Well, thank you, and I guess I thank the witnesses for their testimony and the members for their questions. And the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional written comments and written questions from members. And again, I thank our witnesses, both of you, for all of your great work in this very important field and how important it is. And appreciate, again, the students being here. We did share the book that you gave us today. We shared it with the students so they can bring it back. And I don't know if the students were here when Dr. Córdova showed the video, but that is also on the website. So if you'd like to see that and share that with your other classmates, as well as the book, we hope we will see more of all of you in the STEM and STEAM fields. So with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.